At Hollywood, very few people possess a resume as unusual as Mayim Bialik's. She is not only a television star known to millions of viewers through Blossom and The Big Bang Theory, but also a genuine neuroscientist with a PhD. For many years, Mayim's public image has been closely associated with intelligence, rational thinking, and a strong belief in science. But in 2025, the very woman regarded as a symbol of scientific thinking surprised the public when she shared a deeply challenging personal health experience. It was not a sensational story, nor was it a rejection of science. On the contrary, it was the honest account of someone who had trusted the modern medical system, but came to realize that not every experience unfolds in the same way. What made the story attract attention was not the incident itself, but the way Mayim chose to confront it. Instead of remaining silent, she decided to share what she had gone through in order to contribute another perspective to the ongoing discussion about health, treatment, and cases that do not follow the expected outcomes. And that also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the eventful journey of Mayim Bialik, a woman who has repeatedly had to redefine herself in the public eye. At the beginning of 2025, Mayim Bialik unexpectedly drew attention when she spoke about a personal health experience that she described as one of the most difficult periods of recent years. According to her account, she experienced unwanted reactions while undergoing treatment with GLP-1 medications, a class of drugs widely used in the treatment of diabetes and for weight management. What made this experience significant was not that it represented the majority of cases, but that it reflected the feeling of someone who suddenly found herself becoming an exception within a system largely built upon successful outcomes. Mayim explained that the most difficult aspect was not only the physical effects, but also the feeling that she constantly had to explain her own experience. Around her were countless positive stories, encouraging statistics, and people achieving the results they had hoped for. In that environment, speaking openly about a different experience could sometimes feel as though she were moving against the prevailing current. For Mayim, it was the first time she truly understood how patients might feel when their outcomes do not fit within the optimistic picture the public is accustomed to hearing about. What is particularly notable is that she did not approach the issue with anger or a rejection of science. On the contrary, Mayim repeatedly emphasized that she still believes in medical research, in data, and in the role of modern treatments. However, as a scientist, she also believes that science should not exist solely to record the most successful cases. It must also listen to exceptions, unusual reactions, and experiences that do not align with initial expectations. In her view, it is precisely these cases that help the system continue to improve. In her reflections, Mayim also addressed a reality that many patients have experienced. Sometimes side effects or personal difficulties receive less attention simply because they do not represent the majority. That does not mean those experiences do not exist. She believes that more open discussions about both the benefits and limitations of treatments would help people make decisions with more realistic expectations, rather than seeing only an entirely positive picture. For many followers, the most striking aspect was not the story itself, but the person telling it. This was a woman who had spent years studying neuroscience and had built her public image around reason and evidence. Therefore, when Mayim chose to speak openly about vulnerability, disappointment, and the sense of helplessness she had experienced, many people felt they were seeing a very different side of her, not a television star or a doctor of science, but simply a person trying to understand what had happened to her. In reality, this was far from the first time Mayim Bialik had found herself at the center of major public debates. Throughout her life, she has repeatedly become a focal point because of unconventional choices, controversial opinions, or simply because she has consistently refused to follow the path others expected her to take. And that journey began long before the world knew her as a neuroscientist or as the star of the Big Bang Theory. Long before the public came to know Mayim Bialik as a scientist or as Amy Farrah Fowler in the Big Bang Theory, she was already a familiar face on American television. Success came to Mayim at a very young age, and by the early 1990s, her leading role in Blossom had made her one of the most prominent young stars in the United States. While many teenagers dreamed of becoming famous, Mayim was already living beneath the spotlight every day. But what set her apart from many child stars of her era was that she never viewed Hollywood as the entirety of her life. Despite a demanding schedule, Mayim maintained a deep commitment to education. People who worked with her often remarked on her natural love of science and her constant curiosity about how the world works. Even as her acting career continued to flourish, she never abandoned her long-term educational ambitions. After Blossom ended, Mayim made a decision that surprised many people. Rather than using her fame to expand her entertainment career, she chose to return to university. According to accounts she later shared in interviews, she turned down opportunities to attend prestigious universities in order to remain close to her family and study at UCLA. It was a less glamorous choice, but one that clearly reflected how she consistently prioritized personal values over appearances. The years that followed were far from easy. While many of her former colleagues continued appearing on screen, Mayim devoted most of her time to studying and research. She completed her undergraduate degree and then pursued a doctorate in neuroscience. It was a path requiring years of research, discipline, and perseverance, completely different from the entertainment industry she had once known. In 2007, Mayim officially earned her PhD in neuroscience with research related to Prader-Willi syndrome, a rare genetic disorder. At the time, very few people in the entertainment industry possessed a comparable academic background. She was no longer simply a famous actress, but a formally trained scientist. Interestingly, just as many people assumed she had left Hollywood behind forever, an unexpected opportunity emerged. That opportunity was called the Big Bang Theory, and no one could have predicted that someone who had stepped away from the spotlight to pursue science was about to enter the most successful chapter of her entertainment career. When Mayim Bialik appeared in the Big Bang Theory as Amy Farrah Fowler in 2010, the role was initially intended as a guest appearance. However, the audience's positive response quickly changed everything. Amy, with her intelligence, eccentricity, and charm, gradually became an indispensable part of the series. What made it particularly unique was that, for the first time in her career, Mayim hardly needed to play a scientist. She genuinely possessed the academic background represented by her character. The success of the program returned her to the ranks of America's most beloved television stars. Multiple Emmy nominations, valuable contracts, and widespread audience affection gave Mayim the kind of career many actors dream of. Yet as her fame continued to grow, every statement she made and every personal decision she took came under increasingly intense public scrutiny. Unlike many celebrities who avoid sensitive topics, Mayim frequently shared her views on education, mental health, and parenting. Several books she published advocating attachment-focused parenting received support from many parents, while simultaneously generating considerable debate. Supporters viewed her as a voice offering a different perspective, while critics argued that she sometimes expressed overly certain opinions on issues that were inherently complex. Mayim's academic background also unintentionally became a double-edged sword. Many people admired her for her intelligence and expertise, but others felt that she often entered public debates with a level of confidence that made it difficult for them to relate to her perspective. Over time, Mayim's public image became increasingly polarizing. She was no longer a television star universally adored by everyone, but rather a figure who frequently sparked divided opinions and intense discussion. Alongside the pressures of public life, her personal life also went through significant changes. Following her divorce in 2013, Mayim embarked on the journey of single motherhood while maintaining the demanding schedule of one of the most successful television series in the world. She has repeatedly acknowledged that balancing work, family responsibilities, and constant media attention was far from as easy as many people imagined. It was also during this period that Mayim began to recognize a familiar reality of Hollywood. The more famous someone becomes, the harder it is to control the gap between their public image and their true self. And just a few years later, An article published during the sensitive height of the Me Too movement would thrust her into the biggest media controversy of her career. In that 2017 article, Mayim, speaking as a woman who had worked in Hollywood for decades, described the way she had chosen to build her career. She portrayed herself as a relatively private person who rarely attended industry parties and often tried to establish clear boundaries in professional settings. Her intention appeared to be to share her personal perspective on her career journey while expressing sympathy for women who had spoken out about the painful experiences they had endured. However, the public reaction was far faster and far more intense than she had anticipated. Some readers argued that parts of the article could be interpreted as linking a woman's clothing choices or behavior to the risk of harassment. Although that was not what Mayim explicitly stated, a wave of criticism quickly erupted across social media. Many accused her of unintentionally promoting a message that could be interpreted as placing responsibility on victims. Within a short period, Mayim went from being someone who regularly spoke about education and mental health to becoming the center of a national debate. Criticism appeared in newspapers, television programs, and across online platforms. Many people who had once admired her felt disappointed, while others argued that the article had been interpreted more negatively than originally intended. In response to the strong backlash, Mayim quickly issued a clarification. She stated that she did not believe anyone should ever be held responsible for another person's wrongdoing and expressed her support for victims who had courageously shared their stories. But like many public controversies in the age of social media, the explanation was not enough to bring the debate to a complete end. For Mayim, this was not simply a media storm that lasted a few weeks. It left a lasting mark on the public image she had spent years building. For the first time, she had to confront the feeling that a large part of the audience no longer saw her in the same way as before. And although her career continued to move forward, the controversies of 2017 would continue to be revisited for years afterward, particularly when one of the biggest opportunities of her television career unexpectedly emerged. In 2020, America was shocked by the passing of Alex Trebek, who had hosted Jeopardy for nearly 4 decades. More than just a presenter, Trebek had become almost inseparable from the identity and history of the famous game show. As a result, the question of who would succeed him quickly became one of the most closely followed topics on American television. During the search for a new host, Mayim Bialik emerged as a notable candidate. With her strong academic credentials, on-camera experience, and public image closely associated with intelligence and knowledge, she appeared to possess many of the qualities that matched the spirit of the program. When she was selected to participate in guest hosting trials and later became one of the show's principal hosts, many believed this could be the next major success story in her career. However, the position also placed Mayim under a level of pressure she had never experienced before. Jeopardy not only had an enormous loyal audience, but also a fan community deeply attached to Alex Trebek's legacy. Every pronunciation, every facial expression, and every decision made by a new host was compared to his. Many viewers felt that no one could truly replace Trebek, and anyone who occupied that chair would inevitably face expectations that were almost impossible to meet. Alongside debates about her hosting style, controversies from Mayim's past were repeatedly brought back into the spotlight. Previous statements, controversial articles, and opinions that had once drawn criticism resurfaced in the media once again. As a result, every step of her journey on Jeopardy unfolded under intense public scrutiny. Things became even more complicated when the American entertainment industry entered a period of writers' and actors' strikes. Mayim chose to show support for colleagues participating in the industrial action, a decision that earned respect from many people but also created uncertainty about her future with the program. Ultimately, after numerous changes in production strategy and network direction, she did not continue in the hosting role as before. For many celebrities, losing an opportunity as significant as Jeopardy could be viewed as a painful setback. But for Mayim, it became a moment that forced her to reevaluate the path she wanted to follow. After years of trying to balance science, entertainment, and public expectations, she began directing her energy toward more personal projects, like where she could speak about the things that genuinely mattered to her without having to play any particular role. And it was from those losses that a new phase of Mayim Bialik's life began to take shape, less glamorous perhaps, but also more authentic than ever before. Mayim began focusing on more personal projects. Through her podcast, Bialik's Breakdown, she used her knowledge of neuroscience and her own life experiences to discuss mental health, anxiety, and emotional recovery. It also became a place where audiences could see a more open and genuine version of her. Mayim also expanded into directing with the film As They Made Us, a story about family, loss, and wounds that are not easily healed. Rather than pursuing a flawless image, she became increasingly comfortable sharing both the challenges and the mistakes she had experienced throughout her life. At this stage, what seemed to matter most was no longer fame or praise. After years of facing public pressure, Mayim chose to focus on the values she believed in, build her life on her own terms, and accept that not everyone would agree with her. What do you think about Mayim Bialik's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy behind-the-scenes stories about Hollywood stars, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future content.